Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders with Purpose podcast. I'm Lulai, Chief Strategy and Transformation Officer at Manifesto, and today I'm super excited to be joined by David Amos-Reeves. And in this episode, we explore customer engagement and experience at Prostate Cancer UK, what the next 10 years looks like for the organisation, but most importantly, their customers. We look at the role of AI and technology in supercharging and accelerating some of their ambitions without taking humans out of the loop. And we really think about what does it mean to be a leader leading through change in an organisation right now, what it means to be inclusive and create safe conditions for your teams to thrive in an organisation. So welcome to the podcast. David, Head of Customer Engagement Experience at Prostate Cancer UK, fellow podcaster, host, and contributor to the Manifesto Engagement White Paper last year. So it's an absolute pleasure to have you here. Welcome.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and nice to be on this side of the microphone as an interviewee rather than the interviewer.
Good. I'm glad. Well, I hope the experience is delightful for you, and maybe you can then think about what it's like to be a guest on your podcast.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, for those who don't know you, it would be great if you could just introduce yourself, a little bit about your journey, which, you know, when you spoke to myself, we covered college, psychology, Asda, and then a personal connection that drew you to the sector. So it'd be great if you could share your journey.
Sure, yeah. So I'm currently head of customer experience engagement at Prostate Cancer UK. I've been in the sector since I was about 17. And I fell into it completely by accident. I actually had a pretty indecisive period as a teenager. I didn't want to work. I didn't want to go to uni. I hated the idea of being stuck in education all the time. And it was actually through the sad loss of my friend at the time. Her grandma died of stomach cancer quite suddenly. And the family ended up sort of rallying around an event for Cancer Research UK called the Relay for Life. And we got involved in that. And I found an absolute passion for fundraising. Loved it so much. I went into being a fundraiser multidiscipline for about 10 years. And then also kind of as part of that, discovered this enormous divide between how charities treat their supporters and how supporters receive that treatment, and wanted to do something to change that. So I've ended up working for the last 8 or so years in customer experience.
And you talk a lot about taking those sort of early kind of engagements and interactions with supporters. So like literally you were spending time face to face, right? Yes. With lots of different types of, like, what kind of roles were you doing? What were the types of sort of supporters and audiences that you were spending time with? Yeah,
a little bit of everything. So it started out with events fundraising. So I was on Race for Life with Cancer Research UK and did a lot of kind of that face-to-face on the day stuff and a lot of volunteer management. That then translated into community fundraising. So lots of like working with committees and individuals wanting to fundraise for Cancer Research UK at the time. And that kind of spanned out into lots of different charities after that. And then throwing in a mixture of working with corporate partners as well. So I worked with some partnerships and also with some high value major donors as well. So a little bit of everything thrown in. Yeah.
And could you share a little bit about corporate partnerships? So it's there's sort of a number of layers, right? You're sort of engaging with an organisation, you're thinking about potentially their connection to, you know, the charity you're working with, but then they have their staff and their employees, right? And so, you know, what's your experience of that, and how did you sort of potentially have to adapt what you were doing or the propositions that you were sort of taking to those partners?
Sure, yeah. So I think at the time, you know, casting back 15 years ago, a lot of it was Charity of the Year partnerships. I think a lot of partners, a lot of corporates had this, the use of charities as an engagement tool with their staff. And so it was much about influencing the wider staff and employees that worked there to try and vote for the organisation to get that Charity of the Year partnership. But I was also trying to work in that space where actually I want more meaningful relationships with partners. So trying to understand what it is that they're trying to achieve, you know, strategically, objectively, and how having a good partnership with the organisation, like the Air Ambulance Service, who I worked with, could help them achieve that longer term, rather than it just be a arguably performative action of a Charity of the Year contract. And I'm quite pleased to see the sector's moving away from that type of partnership now, which is good.
Yeah, and that's definitely been my experience of kind of many years, kind of almost that shift from here's a big check and we're all going to have a lovely photo, and then kind of that's the job done, to now what feels like really deep and meaningful strategic partnerships that really kind of blend the sort of outcomes of both organisations. And I guess that's something that you've sort of seen evolve in the sector as well.
100%. Yeah, definitely.
So your current role,
yes,
what does it mean? What day to day, what does it mean to be head of customer engagement experience?
Wow, an awful lot. So
Okay.
I am the head of probably the biggest department in the organisation. It's actually bigger than some of our directorates are. So we've got roughly 7 disciplines. So we've got the customer care team who are on the phone and responding to inquiries and helping supporters and customers kind of navigate their experience with prostate cancer, as well as the supporter side of it, the fundraising side of it. We have the data element of it, so the CRM, our selections, our imports and data management, all in that team. We've got fulfillment in there, so we're looking at all the logistics of how we move stock to people from e-commerce, but also fulfilling responses from our direct mailing campaigns and thanking and banking and things like that, which is a massive part of good supporter relationships. We also have engagement events in the team, so we're looking at kind of how we use events as a way of building relationships with people, not purely about raising money on the night. It's more about how do you use events as a stewardship tool. And then the kind of the bit that I'm really interested in mostly, not that the rest of it's very important, but the bit that I'm really passionate about is the sort of the change stuff. So how is it that we can think about the holistic experience that customers have of the organisation, and how does that then change some of the decisions we might make about our fundraising tactics and our communications tactics? And that's the other part of the team. So very broad, lots for me to get my head around, lots of kind of changing between disciplines. Even within a single day, I could be talking about any one of those at any point.
So when we talk about leadership hats, you then take that to the extreme and you're kind of juggling 6 or 7
pretty much
day in, day out. And is a big part of your role kind of upskilling, building confidence and capability around understanding like what it means to be customer centric and in a modern sort of charity?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're working in a context in the charity sector where we've fundraised the same way for 100 years. We've got a century's worth of behaviour that we're suggesting in the sector that actually we need to undo some of that, and we need to think differently about aligning ourselves to our customers and their needs, rather than thinking about the product or the fundraising silo in which we're in. And so there's a lot of trying to use data and trying to use insight to help elevate some of the thinking and how we communicate with people in a slightly different way, but also kind of on the verge of transforming that whole system that we operate in. So,
and that sort of, I guess, transformation, the system, we definitely kind of see, particularly with organisations we've partnered with, around that shift from outputs to outcomes. So what is it we're trying to achieve, and creating the space for many different outputs that might get you to the outcome, but that is a big shift, and all of it. I started fundraising 20 years ago, and so had my calendar, had my outputs, that's what I was doing, versus, really we're looking for quite big systemic change in an organisation, but also for kind of the audiences. What's your feelings around that shifting kind of, I guess, model that sort of rewards outcomes rather than kind of in further entrenching kind of silos or just outputs and deliverables?
I think it's coming. I think there's there's a few examples in the sector of charities trying to do that. I know the RNIB have recently done a lot of work in there. I think WWF actually, I think probably one of your clients, working in that space as well. And even as a Prostate Cancer UK are exploring what that looks like. And we're doing a big segmentation piece of work at the moment. It's connected to our sort of next 10 years of our strategy. And that is about understanding what is it that customers need from us, what's their motivations, what are the things that we can offer them, so that we can deliver outcomes for our mission and match that with the outcomes for those customers as part of that mission as well. And that's going to change the shape of how we think about our products and how we market to people and how we inspire people to act. So yeah, I think we're, as a sector, I think very early, I think the principles behind it are probably accepted, but the reality of making it happen, we are still a few years away from anything major happening in the sector, I think.
Yeah. And like you say, when we're talking about shifts, we're shifting hundreds of years of kind of systems and ways that things have been done. But the data tells us that actually audiences, customers, supporters, volunteers, they're not happy with the experiences that they're getting anyway. So actually, in terms of the risk and reward, I'm assuming, and obviously the segmentation is probably a big part of that the sort of the known needs and the data and the changing landscape for, health as well, particularly in men's health, that, you folks feel confident and are excited about the prospect of what impact you could have.
Definitely. And I think it's more relevant for charities that are dealing with people as beneficiaries as well as people as supporters. So the overlap on within our data of people that have lived experience or very, very close connection to prostate cancer, and our fundraising for us, that overlap is enormous. And so we need to be really thoughtful about when we're communicating with them. We also have to recognise them not only as a supporter, but also as a man with prostate cancer, or the spouse of a man with prostate cancer, or the son of a man with prostate, whatever it may be. And that's a real shift change in some of how we think about our communications.
And what about the shift in data, behaviour and ownership? So definitely experience myself, my data, my supporters, my time. And actually, and that doesn't come from a bad place. That comes from individual kind of targets and outputs or KPIs that don't reward collaboration or kind of that coming together. What do you think the journey is going to be like for your organisation around that data piece, the KPIs, and how we measure actually customer experience?
Yeah, so I think data ownership isn't too much of an issue for us. We've kind of got over that already over the last few years. So and I can't take any credit for that. That's that's something that was in the motion already. But I have had experience when I worked at the Woodland Trust. There was a lot of they're a membership organisation. That's a big part of their income, regular giving through that. And there was very much their members, they're so important, we need to isolate them and protect them from everything. But actually what I did was use insight to show how one member is different from another member. And actually, if you can create an experience around them, you can, around how they're different, you can actually increase the value of those people by giving them the service that they're actually after. And so for me, as within the sector, it's about trying to use that insight to from a different view. It's the same data, you're just looking at it from a different lens and asking different questions to try and change that kind of belief, that thought behavior behind it. And for us, we're doing a lot at the moment around, we've created our own customer loyalty score, which looks at are people satisfied? Do they trust us? Do they feel committed towards us? It's based on About Loyalty's work. So, we've worked with them in the past as well. And we've created our own customer engagement score, which kind of neutralizes value in that, because one person's £5 might be another person's £5,000, and so the amount someone gives you is sort of irrelevant. It's the act of giving you that's important, and so the customer engagement score kind of neutralizes all that and gives us a bit more of an objective view of supporters on our database and how we might manage them slightly differently.
And does that give people the opportunity to sort of hypothesize, okay, well, this could be an opportunity, and using something like the customer engagement score allows you to kind of prove or disprove, as opposed to it being in isolation of X and Y?
And what we're aiming towards, particularly with the segmentation work we're going through at the moment, is to be able to kind of layer all of these bits of data to come to a really clear decision. Whereas previously, most charities were using a recency frequency value model, which is, have they done something recently? How often do they do it, and what's the value of them? And actually that takes away all of the other decision points around motivation, around product engagement, around channel, around geography, around all sorts of other things that you actually need to layer into that decision making as well. And so we're trying to kind of superpower the amount of information we give people to make those decisions.
And I assume technology will have a really important role to play in terms of processing, going through all of that data. And you spoke a little bit about, how do you process large amounts of kind of free form data, free text, whether it's on a feedback form or, it's on a whatever, an email, etc., reply. And so how is the sort of technology piece, and I'll say the word AI because we spoke about it, so we'll just put it out there. What role is that going to play in actually like accelerating, supercharging, enabling, this to really have the impact it could have?
Yeah, I think obviously AI is the big topic at the moment. There's lots of organisations that are coming up with whole AI strategies, and actually, I think it has a lot to offer. I think we are often thinking about it wrong because we're thinking about it as a thing in and of itself rather than something that supports your strategy or your technology that already exists. So I think it's going to be very helpful in terms of helping us crunch those enormous amounts of data and presenting it in a way that's quite useful and tangible, as well as helping us make some of those quick and fast decisions to personalize and personalize in a way that's going to drive results, drive outcomes, and that's something that a human just can't do. So I think it's inevitable. For us in our organization, we are exploring AI quite a lot at the moment. It's mostly kind of individual and trying to work out like how do we gain individual efficiencies and help our own roles. But we are also exploring, well, what does that look like from how can we improve our operations and our systems that can help with that. But we are a little bit behind the curve, I would say, on our marketing automation and our our ambition is quite high, but our ability to do that with our technology is not matching that at the moment. So we need to catch up. But I'm a big fan of not using technology for technology's sake. You have to connect it to the behavior change, the process change, and your business case for why you're using that technology. Often technology drives the decision rather than the other way around.
100%. And we definitely talk about that at Manifesto, kind of just because you can doesn't mean you should. And your lovely sentiment around technology for technology's sake, and the same with AI around kind of like it's enabling you to achieve your outcomes as opposed to the AI thing. And and part of that, I'm assuming kind of in your role, kind of helping educate or support kind of people's understanding. And I wondered also how far that goes with the organisation in terms of like executive board level, kind of your ambitions for customer centricity, and then what that might mean, like how engaged at that level is the organisation.
Very engaged, I would say. I believe one of our trustees is from Google and has a huge AI interest. So, we have it at board level and, the directors definitely engage with it. I wouldn't say technology is their strong point, but that's something that we acknowledge. Equally across the heads team and at that kind of departmental level, we're all exploring it a little bit at different ways that we can use it, whether that's to support operational efficiency, whether that's to help with how people engage with us. So like you mentioned how it's going to be used in customer experience, but also kind of thinking a bit more broadly, actually strategically. We're going into a context now where most marketing is driven by AI, and actually it's not humans talking to humans anymore. And there's a real opportunity for charities to bring the human out more and stand out even more. So like, how do we actually use the context of AI being everywhere as a USP for us to go, well, we bring the people and this is where the people show up.
And it's making me think, you're in an event, you're going to see someone's reaction to something that's been shared, a story, an interaction, their emotional response that will spark something. And it's kind of like you can't kind of replace that. And a big thing, particularly for the sector, and is something we're really passionate about, is around kind of it's AI plus people. It isn't AI to AI. And actually, we have a ethical responsibility to make sure that, some of the interactions, we're dealing with people in healthcare systems and journeys. And so, being able to offer the level of and this is the tension that, I think we have to sort of navigate as a sector, is the sort of the growing demand for services, the needs, the sort of challenges in the healthcare system, how you interface with the NHS, but then kind of the personal kind of relationship and support that, people need access to. So making the decisions around what you automate, what you can't replace a human in this part of a service kind of pathway. Is like, has that been part of the thinking and kind of, I guess, soul searching to a certain extent around the next 10 years? Like, what does the role of Prostate Cancer UK as a charity really look like?
Yeah, I mean, digital and AI is a big part of what that is going to be in that 10-year strategy. We don't really know properly what that looks like in practice yet, but, you know, we've got to consider things like there are trade-offs you make when you create chatbots. You know, I get really frustrated when you're chatting to a chatbot and you just say, I just want to speak to somebody. And I keep going around in circles with this chatbot, and there's just this barrier created. Yeah. And what you're doing in those situations is pushing the effort out of the organisation. So you've achieved an objective for the organisation. We're really efficient. We don't have to deal with these inquiries. But actually what you're doing is pushing that effort onto the customer, which long term is going to be a bad thing. The other thing that I'm really mindful of is that internally people have started using AI to write their emails. And we're using, we're a remote, largely hybrid organisation where we don't spend a lot of time together. And so most of our interactions between colleagues is digital. And if you're using Copilot to write your email and someone else is using Copilot to write an email, all of a sudden there's no personality there. Yeah. Because Copilot will give you the average of everything, and that average doesn't exist in real life. Yeah. And so I'm really mindful about how colleagues are using AI, like you say, that human plus AI, because that's the thing that we still need to build relationships with people, whether that's customers, whether that's each other, and using Copilot to do that for us isn't the right way of doing it.
No. Yeah, that feels like an extreme trade-off of we're into transacting, and therefore where is the value? Where's the sort of that magic piece around, okay, we are a not-for-profit and actually, you know, fueled by passionate humans who really care about the cause and the impact. You know, that's why so many of us join. It's a personal connection, right? Or it's something that just, you know, you want to have that impact. And so, I think there's so many things that is a watching brief for the sector around what's coming, but at least being aware of that, like, there are trade-offs to be made, and we talk a lot about this in kind of strategy development and kind of, you know, you have your vision, how you get there is going to evolve over the next 3, 5, 10 years. And as it feels right now, 6 months, 10 months, 12 months. And so being able to trade off kind of responsibly. Yeah. And I wondered, with those trade-offs, the customer impact. So at every juncture, you might make a decision that might feel internal, but actually could have an impact on that customer experience. And so is that being embedded into helping people make decisions that, you know, are always considering the customer?
Yeah, and that's part of what will kind of happen, I guess, over the next few months as we evolve into this new strategy, is to think about being really intentional about those trade-offs. So they're often, you know, we talk about systemic change and making sure that customers within the system and decision, you know, we look at our paperwork around decision making, it's always finances and operations. Like, actually we need to start bringing customer into that really explicitly. And so some of those decision points have to have, what's the trade-off we're making here? And a recent example is we doing a DM campaign out in summer to our database to try and, you know, raise money. Really great appeal about men's experience of prostate cancer and the unintentional side effects of treatment and how we can help alleviate some of those. But on the outer of it, there's some quite strong words that have come from our supporters about, you know, from men with prostate cancer, about some of the side effects that we've got on that. And so there's a really intentional trade-off there of a little bit of bringing the reality to life for people who are receiving that, but also a very real impact on men with prostate cancer who might be early on their diagnosis of, I'm seeing all these scary words on this envelope. I'm now scared. And so what do I need to do about that? And so bringing those kinds of choices out really intentionally, and being really thoughtful about different customer groups that we might be interacting with, depending on what their needs are at that moment, is going to help us kind of deliver a great service for them.
Yeah. And I've definitely seen, you know, really impactful examples of that, particularly when you think about sort of cancer pathways and in various different guises. And, you know, when I've been involved in kind of audience research, service user research, it very much has been quite loud and clear. Me and my milestone, like, I'm here in my journey, so then what I'm expecting is for you to just like help hold me in this moment. I potentially might not be ready for the next thing, and you know, and we know every journey is going to be different. There's going to be kind of diversions and setbacks. One of the amazing kind of examples I've seen is Breast Cancer Now, and they have someone like me.
Yeah.
So you are kind of matched up with a volunteer, and they are a couple of, you know, steps ahead of you so that they can help people affected by breast cancer and kind of preparing, but without that sort of kind of scare. And so I wondered, within that sort of, even that creative, was there a thought around what kind of wording or support should we be including in here that help someone who might react in that way? They're not quite ready to know that, but need to be held in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And even with, you know, we'd expect people to call us and get in contact with us about campaigns like that to say whatever they're feeling, because people do give us feedback quite readily. And so we're prepping our team to make sure that they direct and signpost people accordingly and give them the support they need when they've got questions about what might be contained in this letter as well. So all of that's kind of in the thinking too.
Yeah. Well. And with so sort of supported care, customer care sitting within your remit, and in the couple of transformation programs I've been involved in, UNICEF UK, RNIB, where actually closing that feedback loop back to planning, strategy, creative, kind of, is that a key part? You know, you're on the front line. These people speaking to these audiences have such great insight, and sometimes it doesn't necessarily find its way back to that planning, strategy, creative piece. I'm assuming that you're very much kind of not in that space.
It does happen. So the customer experience manager, Grace, she's really good at kind of feeding back to teams kind of what's happening. And so, you know, this campaign is an example. We've got very clear kind of remit around what we want to share back to fundraising and to help with the decision making. But as an organisation, we're in the process of setting up a voice of customer program, and that isn't just what we're hearing from the front line in terms of the inquiries, but it's also what are the signals in the data, what are the things that our database is telling us before it's too late. Because quite often, by the time someone's opted out, by the time they have not responded to the next appeal a year later, by the time they cancel their regular gift, the damage has already been done.
Yeah.
And so the voice of customer work is about trying to spot those signals beforehand so that we can then feed that back into the system, as you say, around our planning, around our comms, and around some of our decision making, to see what we can do to prevent that ever happening at all. You know, essentially sealing the leaky bucket.
Yes. And there, you know, and you see examples of this in other sectors around kind of churn risk. Yeah. What are the indicators that show they haven't gone yet, but there's disengagement or something that's kind of happening, and being able to kind of track that? So voice of the customer. So we met someone amazing, Caroline Appleton from Calm Zone, recently joined the organisation, and she shared that every Friday team meeting, a supporter comes along.
Love that.
Mostly in person. So they're rocking up on a Friday, having a great old team meeting. And I was just like, wow, I love it. And they just, no scripting, very much kind of, they are part of the entire kind of team meeting. And I don't know if you'd heard of any other organisations. There's that, I mean, to me, I was like, this is amazing. Why don't more people do this?
Yeah, not to that extent. And it's something I'd love to do, actually.
Yeah.
We try and introduce things like, even little things like, just having 5 minutes to write a thank you card to just someone completely random on the database. You don't need to think about it strategically, trying to encourage people to do that kind of thing, just to try and connect to those people and also express gratitude at the same time. But we do try and bring our customers into a lot of our decision making. So we particularly around our Black health equity strategy. So Black men are twice as likely to get prostate cancer, and also at later stages as well. And so we have men with lived experience and Black men from the community that inform a lot of our decision making kind of at strategic level. And the little things like we've got with the segmentation project, we've got our qual phase happening at the moment. So we've got focus groups that are happening over the next couple of weeks. I'm inviting the fundraising team to come in and listen, and hear the actual words from people that might be supporters, might also be general public, and hear their experiences and how they're different from each other, because you don't see that in the data. And so we want to try and bring that to life for people, for sure. Yeah.
And I'm sure this goes without saying, if you work in a not-for-profit organisation and someone invites you to come along to watch some research, be part of something, go.
Yeah.
Run, don't walk.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Amazing. So I feel like I have done the deepest dive slightly into customer engagement, customer experience. So let's talk about you.
Okay.
So your role as a leader, the evolution, and you are very open about that transition you make from kind of managing and doing to, oh, I'm suddenly leading all of these people, and then maybe, some might have been peers, right? That happens in lots of organizations. So yeah, I would love to hear about your experience of transitioning from the doing to it's on my shoulders now. I'm the accountable leader.
Yeah. I think that for me really started at the Woodland Trust. I had a role there as one of the early people in the sector as a supported journey manager.
Yes.
And back when all it ever was, let's map a journey, a linear journey, let's stick people on it. And I wanted to do something quite different. And so that meant me having to think very differently about how is it that I can bring people with me in this thinking, challenge existing thinking, to think about, segmenting our customers differently, designing journeys around those segments rather than our products and things like that. And so for me, that was me as a manager who didn't line manage anybody, but I had enormous influence with other people, and learning that skill of being able to influence, being able to kind of sit in other people's spaces and understand their challenges, and then also help problem solve with the customer lens and that kind of work. And what I'd learned there was actually that all roads lead to leadership. Every challenge, doesn't matter where it comes from, it all goes to the directors. And so I, at the time, took the opportunity, very thankful to Woodland Trust for this. I did a master's degree apprenticeship in senior leadership. And so I spent about 3 years solidly educating myself on this stuff and really understanding what does it mean to be a good leader. What do you have to do in terms of making that transition from being a manager who's doing stuff to leading a group of people who want to do things in their own way that are different from your own. And so lots of time spent kind of thinking about that, reflecting, lots of self-awareness, understanding the impact I have on other people, where one of them was I'm quite unemotive, I think is probably the language that has been said to me before. And so thinking about how is it that where people are very emotive and that's how they engage with the world, how do I sit in that space with them when it's not my normal kind of way of working? And the other one was I think first, speak later. And so how is it that when I speak, I take people on the journey of the thinking before I get to the point? Because there's been times where I've said something and people just don't get it. And then I get frustrated because I'm like, how don't you get it? It's really clear. And so for me, it's been a real journey of kind of watching the impact that I have on people, understanding it, and then adapting to that to try and hopefully be a good leader for those.
Yes. And you had was it share the thinking? That was your mantra.
Yeah, it's still written on my, I've got a whiteboard behind my desk at home that's got all of kind of little leadership prompts for me personally. And that one is underlined in big, bold capital letters because it's one that I can easily do without thinking. Ironically.
And how did you, so the sort of learning that you did, has that helped you also collaborate, work alongside other leaders? And you talk about is it the horizontal leadership? Kind of talk a bit about kind of your experience of that and the value of kind of being able to separate between, team directorate leadership and actually being part of a broader kind of leadership team.
So I obviously can't take any credit for this and I have no idea where the credit goes, so if someone can find it, that's great. But this concept of team 1 versus team 2, and it's particularly prevalent if you're a director or a head of department. I would probably say more important as a head of department because you're between two worlds. And often what you see in an organization is people will be in a team 2 space, and the team 2 space is the team that you're responsible for directly. And so all of the decisions you make, all of the boundaries that you protect, all of the priorities that you make are about the people that you lead, rather than necessarily about the sum of the whole organization. And so that team 1 space is how all of those heads of department come together to deliver what the organization is trying to achieve, in which the team 2 is also aligning up behind. So if your team 1 is dysfunctional, if your team one doesn't have clarity over what the direction of travel is, what the priorities are, who's making decisions, all of those kinds of things, you're automatically going to put team two into dysfunction too, because they're going to be competing across the organization.
Yeah.
And that happens in every organization. It's a natural kind of thing that happens. But for me, what I want to try and do personally is spend much more of my time in that team one space, so that when I'm with other heads of departments, I'm talking about things not from my selfish agenda from customer experience. I'm actually talking about it as a adult to adult conversation about what does this mean for the organization, and how do we come to a decision point together that we then consistently give down to the team. And the other way it shows up is where teams might be in conflict with each other. Quite often what will happen is a manager will escalate it to their head of department. That head of department will tell the manager the decision, and then that is made. In my situation, what we're trying to do at Prostate Cancer UK is, well, actually, if there's conflict, the two heads have a conversation first, and we work out what that kind of sense of direction is and what the challenges are, so that when we go back down to the managers, there's a consistent message. Yeah. And so next time it happens, both managers know what to do without our input. So we're kind of getting rid of that sort of teacher-student, parent-child relationship. We're trying to kind of eradicate that almost completely, but it takes a long time.
Yeah. And would you say the sort of current setup, right, of being hybrid/remote, like, how is that hindering that ability to kind of, because some of those connections are historically have been made in physical spaces, right, in interactions that you don't necessarily, whereas now they're sort of manufactured moments, or someone's calling you directly on Teams, you're like, this is not going to be good news.
Yeah. And I think, working remotely, and with a lot of people working remotely, it's very difficult to build those real human connections. And so it's about making a real deliberate intention in how you communicate with people, both at the start of meetings and also kind of via Teams. Like, I've got team chats all over the place at work that are just full of GIFs and like music chat and food chat and things like that, because that kind of unemotive thing that people say about me, actually I want to try and bring my personality out and let people learn who I am, so that when we do have those moments of tension, people understand where that tension might be coming from. And actually just being upfront about raising those and flagging those moments of tension as well is a healthy and helpful thing to do.
And so you spoke a bit about your manual of me, which definitely sort of comes and goes, I think, particularly in where we work in an agency, we have sort of different teams have a different version of that. And then when you start working with a new organization, it's like, right, okay, we really need to kind of get to know each other. How has that helped you? Is there an evolution of that kind of needs to exist in a slightly different environment that we're working in now?
Yeah, so the Manual of Me, it's a really useful kind of website that asks you prompt questions that you can answer, and the idea is that you can share that with other people so that they get a sense of who you are, what's important to you, how you operate, how you think, all of those kinds of things. I don't really share it that much. I've got it. It's not something I share with everybody all the time. It's there. The value in it is when you first interact with somebody, when you invite a new member into your team, or you're about to embark on a new project, is actually spending the time having those conversations with each other, because it's going to resolve so many moments of tension that it's going to avoid them entirely. Because actually, if you start with that space of, I understand where you're coming from and they understand where you're coming from, all of a sudden that tension isn't personal anymore, and you can talk about it objectively. So being able to say, in my case, sometimes I might say things without context. There is thought behind it, but they need to understand that the thought's behind it, so that actually the action they can take, if I failed in my bit to share my thinking, the action they can take is, oh, David's done that thing again. I'm just going to ask some questions about where it came from, rather than it being an instant reaction of, I disagree, I don't like that. So it's helpful kind of in those interpersonal relationships. Yeah.
And it does feel at the moment sort of that trade-off is being made more and more because of time and capacity.
Yes.
I've got 15 meetings, therefore I'm just bouncing, rather than actually, to your point, what's the time we're investing now, which like actually means there isn't a huge opportunity cost later down the line when like we're all humans, right? Stuff happens. That's what makes the magic, but also creates challenges, blockers, and tensions.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the bonuses about my team, because of the diversity in the disciplines, when we come together as a department, we can't actually talk about work because it sort of doesn't really matter. Like, you could talk about data ops in one session, it will just completely exclude half the team.
Mm-hmm.
And so we spend all that time talking about stuff about interpersonal relationships. We've done dilemmas, we've done psychological safety, we've done self-awareness, we've done all sorts of bits of work that are about how do we function better as individuals and as teams so that we're able to go about doing our jobs in a really meaningful way. And that investment it just pays off so many times over. I think of one of occasion very early on in my time in the team, there's a member of the team, a manager that I had a lot of tension with. I didn't line manage her. There was someone between us, and I would say something and she would take it in a way that I didn't intend. And so I took the opportunity to say, hey, let's have a conversation about this. Let's not talk about the thing. Let's talk about what's going on in your mind, and I'll tell you what's going on in my mind so that I can understand you and you can understand me. And she said, is this going to solve the problem? I said, well, no, we're still going to have tension, but we're going to understand where the tension is coming from, which means that you're not wasting your energy getting emotional about it, and I'm not wasting my energy feeling like I've done something wrong. We sort of understand where it's coming from so that we can have a meaningful conversation. And so when those moments happen, it's probably saved us hours worth of demotivation, upset, whatever it may be, because we've set that foundation of this is how we operate, and that's okay.
And with those interactions, that example you've just shared, so feedback, and actually, like, the meta nature of this, feedback is a gift, literally feedback from customers, right? But actually, as human beings who are spending a huge amount of time together, I think there's a real spectrum of people saying and wanting feedback, but actually the reality of how it feels to give and receive feedback. And I wondered what your thoughts were, your experiences, and how you've evolved kind of that concept being, pure as it is, to it should be a gift.
It is a gift. I think that the mechanisms that are in place at the moment about training people on how to give feedback are wrong. And I think they're wrong for two reasons. The first one is that you get given this really inhuman framework. What's the situation? What's the behavior? What's the impact? What's the action I want you to take? People don't communicate like that, right? And all of that framework is about protecting you as the person who's giving the feedback to give the feedback to somebody else. So first thing is that's really impersonal, and so it doesn't really like help that relationship develop kind of into the future. The second part of feedback is all the training is focused on giving feedback, and the problem is people are very bad at receiving it. And actually the art in all of this like completing this cycle is, it doesn't matter if somebody's really clunky at giving feedback. It's how you receive it that's really important. And that is to say, thank you so much. I've got some questions for clarity. I just want to understand a bit more. And then I'll take that away. And then that's all it needs to be. And then that person who's giving the feedback has had a good experience of giving feedback, because they haven't felt like you've got defensive. They haven't felt like you've disagreed with them. They haven't felt like there's an emotional kind of interpersonal kind of tension there. And that's the thing that makes that person want to give feedback again, because next time they do it, they're not going to be scared that you're going to react in a really negative way. And so that's what I think is really important. And I had a really interesting conversation with one of my team fairly recently. We're coming around to our kind of annual delivery and development cycle. That's a whole of the conversation. And one of the things that they said to me was, I've been here for 4 years and I've never had feedback. And I said, okay, I'm going to test that for you. Because the way that I give feedback, because I don't give it in a, here's the situation, here's the behavior, here's the impact, here's the action. I give it in conversation. I give it through guidance. I give it through sort of natural dialogue. They hadn't realized how much I'd actually told them over the past 9 months in terms of feedback. So I laid that out to them and said, here's the things that we've talked about. Here's the pieces where I've given you guidance. Here's how that might link to being feedback. You just haven't heard it as feedback. You've received it as a human, and you've changed and you've evolved from that. And that's brilliant.
And what was their response to that?
I think a little bit of like, oh, I didn't realise that, Yeah. But that's taken me, I guess, probably 10 years to try and perfect that. And I'm still like, there's still moments where I'm like terrified of giving feedback. Like that's completely normal.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fun experience.
Yeah, no, definitely. And it's, for me, like, definitely, I mean, I have very deep rooted people pleasing attributes that the fear of, but, ultimately I get drawn back to, but Lou, you're a kind person, and the kind thing to do is to tell that person like actually what's going on so that they understand. And that's the thing that pushes me every time, is like, no, this is the right thing to do as a in a person your role as a leader or in this situation, that is the kind thing to do. So that is definitely a motivator for me personally.
And there's that difference, that distinction between being nice and being kind.
Yes.
And you can still be compassionate in giving feedback and telling people that they can do things differently. The other thing that I think is really important about feedback is, quite often when you give feedback to somebody, you expect somebody to change in the way that you want them to. And actually it's kind of letting go of that. Like, you're giving somebody a piece of information. It's up to them what they decide to do with it. Yeah. And if you have to give that information again, great, fine, do it. But at the end of the day, it's that person's own agency about whether they want to choose to do anything with that. And I think letting go of like, well, I've told you this and you haven't changed. That's something that as someone giving feedback, you sort of have to let go of a little.
Yeah. So, that desire for, we've had A, now we're B, and we don't need to ever talk about this ever again.
Yeah.
So, belonging, inclusion, and safety.
Yes.
So that came up a couple of times in our conversation, and I imagine, when we're talking about feedback, and quite rightly, never going to achieve full psychological safety, but the reality of how we all show up at work, what conditions we need to thrive, are really, very different to I hope they are from when I first joined the workforce. But you've spent a lot of time in this space, and you've invested time, research, and kind of exploring it. Talk to me a bit about A, why, and B, kind of what have you found in kind of spending time in this space, and what do we need to learn as leaders in the sector?
Sure. So this takes me back to the Woodland Trust again. Yeah. Part of my leadership degree. As part of that, I had to do a work-based project, essentially the dissertation that was in a topic area that would benefit the organisation that I worked for. And we'd recently done a staff survey, and there were some results in there. It was all generally pretty good, but there were some results in there that I was quite intrigued by, and it was about kind of interpersonal relationships between managers and things like that. So I wanted to do a bit of a deep dive into that, and under the lens of psychological safety. And I had a couple of assumptions. The first one was that psychological safety will be different between different directorates, and how people experience psychological safety will be different between the layers from director and down. Seems to fairly make sense. So we did an assessment on the whole organisation. They took part in a survey, and then what I did was I used the results of that assessment to pick the lowest scoring team and the highest scoring team, and then focus group them, and to understand, well, what's happening in these teams that makes the high scoring team work and the low scoring team not as effective in terms of psychological safety. And it pulled out loads of things, but the bulk of it came down to leadership behaviour. It came down to, what is it that people are role modelling that make people feel unsafe, that they don't even realise they're doing. Yeah. And one very, very simple quote that came out of that was a senior leader who was in a meeting. Somebody made a suggestion, and the senior leader immediately said, that isn't going to work. That's not right for this moment. And it's sort of a natural reaction. Like, that's, a lot of people might react in that way. But what that senior leader didn't realise was that sat with that person enough to tell me 6 months later in a focus group that was a moment that they said, I don't want to feedback in a group anymore. Yeah. And so I just got really invested in this and thought, I need to work out how I can do things that are going to help the people that I lead feel safe. And as you say, you can't get 100%, but lots of work with the team in terms of how they're feeling safe around me. So making sure that when people do give me feedback, I reward them for it, recognizing tiny interpersonal risks that people take. So even just speaking up in a meeting and saying, thank you so much for speaking up. Like where people ask for help, I'm like, this is amazing. Next time you ask for help, come to me straight away. Like like some of them are really quite tiny, but some are also quite big. And just making sure that you're doing that consistently, so that you're feeding that feedback loop of, oh, this was a good thing for me to do. David responded really well. He didn't judge me. He didn't think any less of me. He actually recognized and rewarded me for taking that risk. They're the things that build people's psychological safety up, to the point where the team now challenge me if I say something phrased in a way that I wouldn't normally phrase it. They'll go, David, you don't sound like you. What's going on? People will come up to me in the office now in the team and go, are you okay? You seem a little bit off today. Just things like that. It happens all the time in the team, and that's a really lovely thing to see. I had a really interesting moment so we had our own staff survey, Prostate Cancer UK. Results came back early this year, and my department results were terrifying. I saw them and I was devastated, because some of the things in there around kind of how people feel safe at work and all of that, they were really low, like amongst the lowest in the organisation. But I'd been doing all this work for 2 years to go like, let's make you feel all safe. So I did a load of exploring with the managers, with the team. We did some workshops. We really got into it. And actually what had transpired was, in the team unit, everyone feels safe, because we've built those relationships, the psychological safety between the units, between me and between them. But because they know what good psychological safety feels like, it makes the whatever the word is, with other teams who aren't part of that, it makes that feel worse. So when they were scoring about the organisation and how they're experiencing the organisation, it came out worse, because they were feeling even a bigger difference between their team unit and the teams that they work with outside of that unit. And so my challenge now is, how do I translate the good work that I'm doing with my team so that they can feel safer outside of the department, challenging, asking for help, all of those kinds of things. Fascinating stuff.
Wow. I mean, it's the kind of stuff that you could just go further and further into. One thing I was going to ask around psychological safety. So I am ending my current trustee term after 6 years, but it was my first trustee role. And I was actually had a lovely kind of reflection session with our co-chair of the board. And I was saying, gosh, 6 years, long time. And I don't know how I did it. I didn't know that I would be valuable speaking up in meetings. And I wondered if you've ever kind of explored that level of psychological safety when, what we're trying to do in the sector is bring diverse, inclusive, kind of like really representation, lived experiences into quite a formal governance structure where you might not necessarily feel psychologically safe. I personally have for the last 6 years, and I'm now thinking, I don't know if I'll get this experience somewhere else. It's been amazing, but I was, a bit nervous about stepping into a new arena and feeling like, can I say what I think? Will I sound stupid? Will they just think, oh God, why have we recruited this trustee? Not my experience, but I wondered, what your thoughts are.
I mean, all of those thoughts and feelings are what everyone has, right? And that's part of what psychological safety is. It's people's internal beliefs about how someone else might respond, even though it's all assumption based. And so that happens everywhere. And I just think that the more that leaders and other people in kind of the ether around this space can be open-minded, that can be curious with questioning, that can thank people for and recognizing those interpersonal risks, that thing of there is no silly question. And there was a really great moment so we do a town hall every month where the whole organization gets together. The CEO stands up in front of everybody and is basically saying, ask me whatever questions you've got. And there was a really beautiful moment where someone we'd done loads of work on our Black Health equity strategy, loads of research, we've done loads of staff engagement. Somebody who was new who'd only been in probably 5 or 6 days.
Wow.
First of all, asked a question in front of 200 people and the CEO, which was incredible. And secondly, asked a question that everybody else in the room knew the answer to 6 months ago and had been talking about for a long time. And the CEO responded in such an outstanding way. It's so good that I actually went up to her afterwards and said that was absolute perfect role modeling, because she thanked them for the question. They acknowledged the importance of the question. They gave them an answer without making them feel like, well, we've already got the answer over there, or so there was none of that. And in that moment, the CEO ignored what everybody else knew and focused that response on the question being asked. And it's just a really beautiful example of it.
I don't know which direction to go. I've got 3 more things I want to ask you about. I'm adding a 4th one.
Oh, cool.
So psychological safety, change and transformation. So we were talking before we even started recording, and it's even more important that we create the conditions for change and transformation to actually land well, safely, and people are on the journey. Any experience or kind of considerations, you're talking about a journey Prostate Cancer UK is going to sort of embark on. What are your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so I'll share a learning first. So a couple of years ago, myself and another head of department co-led a redesign and reorganisation of the biggest directorate in the organisation. It affected 70 people. Some were at risk of redundancy. Most people were having line management changes and some tweaks to their roles, things like that. With that comes an enormous amount of uncertainty and enormous amount of people questioning things. And Sadie and I, my co-lead on this, in the design of it and the delivery of it, we're really thoughtful about how we communicate with people, how we bring people on that journey, trying to understand different people's challenges, responding to every question, even if that question's been answered 3 times. We really spent a lot of time doing it. And then the HR bit kicked in. And we got into the very sad conversations around consultations and things like that. And I went into HR mode. And my team straight away said, David, you're not talking like you. And that was a moment of me going, hang on a minute, I don't have to be a script. I can still deliver those conversations in a way that's human, in a way that's relevant for those people. And so casting forward a couple of years now, thinking about even this segmentation project, there's going to be an enormous amount of change in that. It's taking a long time. We've been working on it for best part of 8 months now, quite publicly within the organisation. It's going to be another 6 months before people really get their hands on it and do anything with it. But what I'm trying to do is be really open with them and say, look, here's the stuff that we know. Here's the stuff that we don't know. And here's the stuff that you're going to help us answer. And so that they can see the ownership, they can see where I'm going, I haven't got answers for this, and I'm comfortable with that because we'll find the answers and we'll find them together. But also here's the things that won't change, as well as here's the things that we think might change. And so having people have all of the available information so that they can manage assumptions, but also if they do have assumptions, they're about things that we don't know anyway, and so we can direct them a little bit. So for me, it's just having that real open transparency and also kind of admitting those moments where I don't know, and there are things that I need help with, and I need your help with those things. Like just being a human and role modeling that kind of interpersonal risk, I think is really important.
That vulnerability and that transparency, and there are some things you can be transparent and there are some things you can't, and even being clear with that, and those scripts are heartbreaking, and even kind of being really open around some of this stuff I have to read because you need to understand this information, but we're here to have a conversation because ultimately we care about the humans that we spend a ridiculous amount of time with.
And another example, I'm supporting a colleague who's going through redundancy in my team at the moment, and I very openly said to them, I actually don't know how to support you because I'm simultaneously the bad guy. I've made you redundant, but I'm also here saying I want to support you and support you through the process over the next few weeks. And as a leader, I've been very open with her and said, I don't know what you need and I don't know how to support you. So let's step out of all of the emotion and talk about what would actually be helpful from you here. And also, if you hate me, dislike me, whatever, all of that's okay. Just get it out in the open. let's talk about it, rather than have it sat kind of being bottled up and in the kind of background of the conversations we're having. So yeah, just having that kind of openness, I think, is really important.
Yeah. So we're going to wrap up. I've got 3 questions for you, so quick fire. Organisations who are getting started with customer engagement and experience, what's your advice for like the 2 or 3 foundations? Like, don't skip these, otherwise it'll fall over.
I think first one is just to understand your customers, spend time with them. If you don't have money to do a big market research project like we have, just go and sit in a room with them and just listen to how they're different from each other. And that's enough to help you start thinking about how you might design experiences around them. Yeah.
Perfect. Go and speak to some humans and spend some time with them. And like you say, that might just be mystery calling a few folks on the database, or
having them in every Friday.
Yeah, having them in on a Friday. Love that. Okay, so your podcast, your experience may vary with Tash.
Yeah.
Our wonderful Lou Barton is a guest. I've listened to the episode. People get involved. Sausages, surprise and delight, plus, research and stats. There's a real mixture of stuff. Anything you want to say about the podcast? And obviously everyone get involved, start listening and follow.
Yeah, I just think we really enjoy the conversations, and hopefully people will feel that when they're listening to it. But they're both helpful. They are, sometimes funny. We've got an episode coming out this week where me and Tash were crying because of the story that was being told. Like, it's a whole wild journey, but really, really good for people who are trying to explore this customer experience space, trying to explore this system change that we were talking about earlier today. And also, it's a very lonely space for people who are working in that area. So it's just nice to hear other people's voices go, hey, we're going through this too, and here's what we're doing to deal with it.
Yeah. Practical, inspiring, and emotional, as you've described.
Yeah.
So what's your advice for the next generational cohort of leaders coming through in the sector?
Oh, good question. I think leadership generally is going to be so much about humans, and even more so with kind of generational differences in how people are experiencing the workplace. So I just think be incredibly self-aware, understand your impact on other people, and use that in your relationships with those individuals, and they will follow you all day long.
Yeah. Amazing. And then finally, what's next for you, your role, Prostate Cancer UK? Obviously, you've got quite a large segmentation piece of work to deliver, but what's next?
I think, in terms of our customer work, we're probably at the moment positioned maybe fast followers. I think within the next 18 months, we'll be leading, we'll be pioneering. And I'm very excited about that. So, and the team are as well, which is nice.
Okay, well, we're going to put a date in the diary because you're going to come and tell us how you are leading the customer engagement experience pack for the charity sector.
I like it.
Thank you so much for your time, Dave. I loved spending time with you, and to be fair, we could have gone on for much, much longer, but really appreciate everything that you've shared and your openness.
Thank you very much for having me.